Welcome back to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. I'm Ronaldo McKenzie, and in today's episode, we're going to unpack the latest update from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which sheds light on the current state of the global economy in 2023. We're not here talking about the conflict between Israel and Palestine, or what's going on in Gaza or the Middle East. We're not talking about what's going on in Eastern Europe, where Russia is invading Ukraine. We're not talking about, of course, in Asia, where China wants to, is threatening to invade Taiwan. We're not talking about Pakistan and India, where there is ongoing tensions over land, and there also a religious history between those two countries, which also helps to fuel the tension. Today the Neoliberal Round podcast is going to break from the wars and the conflicts, and the wars and the conflicts are part of the outlook, the economic outlook for the rest of the year and into next year. If you've been following the news, if you've been following reports, all you've been fed with is news about what's going on in these places, Ukraine, or what's going on in terms of the conflicts, the tensions in the world today. But what about the economic tension? We want to look at, because the IMF, modeled in all of these reports, is the IMF report. Modeled in all of the tension and what's going on in the world today, it's the IMF report, which many of you may have missed. And we here at the Neoliberal Round podcast will not miss it. The IMF's World Economic Outlook, released just a few days ago, paints a picture of sluggish growth, persistent challenges, and the consequences of significant policy shifts. So today we'll dissect we will dissect or present the key findings, and we want to delve into what this means for the broader global economic landscape. Now, it was just recently, some time ago, we carried a report in the neoliberal journals that talks about the Federal Reserve's raising interest rates. Recently, we carried a report in the neoliberal journals at the Neoliberal Corporation's Moral magazine, the neoliberal.com, talking about the increase in interest rates, and how these incremental increases are also having a negative impact in communities in the U.S. And just so you know, there was an announcement. Biden just approved that $100 million be sent to help support Israel in their war against Hamas. And of course, hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars has already been sent to Ukraine. And I understand, and some time ago, there was a report that Biden is hoping to tax the rich 25%, because he's a capitalist. He supports capitalism, but he also believes in taxing the rich 25%. And there are those who are concerned that, fine, you're going to tax the rich 25%, but where are you going to send the money? Are you going to send it to communities that need it in the U.S.? Because right now, homelessness is soaring, has surged in certain cities. See, for example, in Philadelphia, we carried a report about that. We had David Fair on the show talking. David Fair is the deputy deputy chief at Turning Point for Children, and he's also an activist on housing. Worked as a managing director for Philadelphia City, and he's a guru on housing and homelessness. We've talked about that. And what is needed to end homelessness in Philadelphia? If we double the budget, if we move it from 59 million, multiply that by 2, okay? Let's say we're 118 million or something, 100 million. That will help to fix the budget, which currently homelessness or housing budget in Philadelphia is about 1%. You double that to 2%, okay? If you double the budget, it will only be about 1 or 2% of the city's budget, okay? So not only that, we carried a report recently in the Neoliberal journals. I'm not sure if we carried it up the Neoliberal podcast, talking about a recent report by the U.S. Budget Office and the Census report, and which was also carried in Statista.com, by Anne. I can't remember the article. We referenced it recently in an article. We talked about it in an article recently here at the Neoliberal Journals, in the Neoliberal Post, and the Neoliberal Podcast, talking about the fact that child poverty has doubled since COVID, since 2017, since 2020. It has doubled. It went from 7.5% to 12, and now it's at 17 point something percent. It has doubled over the last 2 years. Okay, but we also want to lift up another report that another report which we talked about, income inequality, or the Gini coefficient, which is suggesting that income inequality is rising at an alarming rate, coupled with that crime and violence in cities and so on. So this particular report, we don't want to sidestep, we don't want to hide this report, we want to unearth it. We do not want this report by the IMF, the IMF's World Economic Outlook. We don't want it to be hidden amongst all the things that's happening in the world today. So we want to lift it up a little bit. We want to talk about the outlook, because they are predicting some kind of sluggish trajectory. This is the Neoliberal Round Podcast. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the episode. I am Ronaldo McKenzie, your producer, the creator and voice of the Neoliberal Round Podcast. The podcast is a news commentary podcast that started in July of 2021, and it considers, discusses, and presents on a wide range of worldwide issues. Now, we continue to explore the world's economic condition, and recently we discussed the looming global recession predicted by J.P. Morgan Chase, as the IMF as the Feds, the Federal Reserves, were dishing out another round of interest rate increases. In today's episode, we delve into the latest update from the International Monetary Fund regarding the state of the global economy in 2020.
Global growth is expected to remain slow and uneven. Projected global growth is 3.0% in 2023, but by 2024 it's expected to drop to 2.9% in 2024. The fight against inflation, and Russia's war in Ukraine, and of course the war in the Middle East now, growing geopolitical fragmentation, are all hampering global growth. Widening divergences among countries and regions are making it harder for some to catch up to higher living standards. And the IMF growth forecast for the United States is projected that by 2024 it will be down to 1.5% from 2.1% in 2022. In China, it's 5.0% in 2023, but will be down to 4.2% in 2024. Eurasia it's even more alarming. It's at 0.7% right now, and it will go up to 1.2% in 2024. India, it was high in 7.2%, but it remains steady, 6.3% between 2023 and 2024. Sub-Saharan Africa, it fell to 3.3% in 2023. It will go up in 4.0% by 2024. But as slowdown in China's economy, persistent inflation, debt, distress, rising food, energy, climate change, greater geopolitical fragmentation, they pose risks to future growth. So avoiding a recession while returning to inflation target remains achievable with the right choices. According to IMF, reforms to improve governance and reducing regulation that hampers trade, global cooperation continues to be critical in this fight against climate change. The resolution of high debt.
This latest report brings sobering news. The global economy is in for a bumpy ride in 2023 and 2024. With a downturn revision in growth forecasts. Now, the global GDP is now projected to grow by a modest 3.0% this year, down from the 3.5% growth we witnessed in 2022. Looking ahead, the IMF anticipates a marginal decrease to 2.9% in 2024 and a slight adjustment from its April 2023 forecast of 3.0%. Now, the report emphasizes a crucial point, that economic activity has yet to regain its pre-pandemic vigor, especially in emerging markets and developing economies and emerging markets. We're talking, say for example, some of the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and we know what's going on over there in Russia. that's also creating part of the problem. What's more, we are seeing widening disparities among different regions. And various factors are identified as culprits holding back the recovery. And these, of course, include the lasting impacts of the pandemic, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, and the increasing fragmentation of the global economic landscape. But it's not just long-term challenges. Cyclical issues also weigh in, such as the effects of monetary policies, tightening to combat inflation, the withdrawal of fiscal support in the face of mounting debt, and the impact of extreme weather events. Now, while many hoped to leave behind the challenges of 2022, we find that numerous problems from the year persist, creating a climate of ongoing uncertainty and subdued growth. Ongoing uncertainty and subdued growth prospects. Let me say that again. While many hoped to leave behind the challenges of 2022, we find that numerous problems from the past persist, creating a climate of ongoing uncertainty and subdued growth prospects. Now, issues such as elevated global debt, the Ukraine crisis, and heightened geopolitical tensions, and we alluded to them earlier, are still very much with us in 2023. Now, the IMF report also underscores that inflation is projected to remain elevated in advanced economies such as the US, the UK, until at least 2025. And we already know that the Feds have taken several actions here in the US to mop up liquidity by applying incremental increases in interest rates so as to not shock especially the most vulnerable members of our economy. But it doesn't seem as if that is helping or will help to sustain and the efforts that they have been implementing to reduce or to decrease or to keep interest rates at single digits. In fact, while they're able to keep prices down on certain goods, there are some basic consumer goods that's still high or rising, some goods are falling, but basic consumer household goods are rising. So while the Feds are maintaining single-digit interest rates, some of that is as a result of lowering prices coming from certain big item goods, as against, because, say for example, an automobile, the price for automobile have dropped, mortgage prices or housing prices have dropped, but some basic household goods are rising. Okay, so when you factor all of these in, then householders are still affected in communities, because for them the inflation is still at a double digit because of the goods that they purchase. Now, according to Mr. Richter, statista, because he is, according to his reading of the IMF report, he believes that the IMF report is one that projects balanced risks and policy moves. Because according to Mr. Richter, his reading of the report is that despite these formidable challenges, the IMF report suggests that the risks to the global economic outlook are somewhat more balanced compared to 6 months ago. But what's more balanced? It is the IMF report that is more balanced. The IMF report is more balanced. Okay? The IMF seems to have gotten it right this time. They are more accurate. They are reporting, the IMF report, their report suggests that the risks to the global economic outlook are somewhat more balanced compared to 6 months ago. In the past, we were deeply concerned about the US and Swiss banking crisis and the looming specter of a catastrophic US debt default. But the landscape has evolved since then, with policymakers taking measures to address these pressing issues. Now, as we consider the broader economic landscape, it's crucial to take note of the Federal Reserve's determination to gradually raise interest rates. This decision remains in place, even in light of recent prediction by JP Morgan Chase, which forecasts a potential global recession by the end of this year. And I am going to actually talk about that in terms of, I want to explore the implications of this monetary policy and its potential impact on the economy by going back to that particular article. The title of the article is, oh, well, that's not the particular article, but this is another article. Does St. Louis and U.S. cities with high crime and murder rate suffer from relative deprivation? But I don't want to touch that article yet. There's another article which I want to delve into just briefly as we talk, as we explore this monetary impact. We'll be right back after this. Let me try and find that article as we delve into this a little bit more. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the episode. I actually found the article in that I was talking about just now. It's in the neoliberal.com, the neoliberal journals at the Neoliberal Corporation's Moral Magazine at the neoliberal.com. The title of the article is that I wrote, Economic News. The Federal Reserve hikes interest rates amidst looming interest rates. It was an article I wrote back in July of 2027. I began by saying that the Federal Reserve has recently increased interest rates by 0.25 percentage points from 5.2 to 5.5% at that time. They've since increased it at another time, I think a fourth time or a fifth time. But it's in July when they had increased it, it was the highest level in more than 22 years. However, economists, now they were saying, according to the IMF, after they've done that, they announced that we can kiss a recession goodbye based on their efforts because of the inflation. But of course, JP Morgan Chase was predicting a recession, irrespective of the efforts of the Feds to constantly raise interest rates, which affect the poorest people because consumer goods are rising. Economists at JP Morgan are predicting a recession due to credit tightening from high interest rates, which benefits high yield savers and CD holders, the rich. In the article, I said that the mortgage demand has dropped and home prices have fallen. Jobless claims have fallen, while the euro currency is losing ground and is also headed for a recession. And again, you can go to the neoliberal.com for that article. Now, while the Federal Reserve's actions may have been aimed at curbing inflation, economists have sounded the alarm bells for an impending recession, and the tightening may disproportionately affect the middle class and lower income groups, potentially exacerbating income inequality, which we know that is an issue, which there's another article I'm going to share with you, talking about the issue of income inequality and relative deprivation. That is, and I've oftentimes talk about relative deprivation in my class that I teach, Caribbean Thought at Jamaica Theological Seminary. It's also a topic that I will touch on in my new book, Neoliberal Globalization. So while the Feds are dealing with inflation here in the U.S., and not just the Feds, but central banks all over both in emerging economies and developed economies are bracing themselves for this. The economic news has been dominated by negative outlook. I think recently, a couple of weeks ago, the Jamaican dollar gained against the US dollar. But of course, economists at JP Morgan are warning of credit tightening, and its impact on the economy has sparked concerns among investors and businesses. Our insiders that work at the highest levels at the central bank and at the highest levels at the U.S. bank and several major banks. We have several analysts who work with us and provide us with information, and they are indicating that while high yield savers and CD holders may benefit from the rate hike, the overall economic implications are far-reaching, leading to a drop in mortgage demand and home prices, as well as potential repercussions for the labor market, which we've already talked about. Furthermore, the euro's decline and the looming possibility of a recession in Europe add to the global economic uncertainty as governments and financial institutions brace for the storm. The world waits to see how these economic events will unfold in the coming months. And of course, that was a couple of weeks ago I published this article. And now, fast speed forward to today, October. In October, we're hearing of sluggish, we're hearing more reports by the IMF of sluggish growth. So it's as if 2023 into 2024 is going to be really rough and bumpy. And people are already experiencing the rough and the bumpy. But of course, President Biden is seeking millions of dollars to send to Ukraine and to Israel, while people here in the U.S. and communities are seeking support and help. But there is no help, except for those people who are student loan borrowers, which are a couple million people, are getting their student loans forgiven or finding ways to lower the interests. But that's only a few Americans are benefiting from that. What about many others? How are they being helped? This is the Neoliberal Realm podcast. We have more to share with you concerning the IMF report and one other article I'm going to briefly lift up. We'll be right back after this. As promised, lastly, we want to delve into the pressing issue of income inequality measured by the Gini coefficient, a topic that I took up at length in my book, Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance. Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance. And in the book, I talk about the Gini coefficient and the Lawrence curve. This particular news commentary, we won't have time to delve into that, but it is a topic that is dear to my heart. It's a topic that I've researched, and when you study income inequality and poverty studies, one of the things you want to check, you want to use the Gini coefficient to study income inequality, and so I want to delve into the pressing issue of income inequality measured by the Gini coefficient briefly, because we hear of J.P. Morgan, Chase, and other economists predicting a recession by year's end. The IMF is also predicting a sluggish growth, a sluggish economy. We are saying that we are out for a bumpy ride. But what about how is it affecting people's income? We talk about how the increases by the Feds in the increase in interest rates, incremental increases in interest rates by the Feds, is already affecting people. But we are seeing evidence that it's not over. More is to come. More hardships are to come. So this is important. Income disparities continue to widen, with the wealthy getting richer and the less fortunate becoming even poorer. This is particularly noticeable in the most economically vulnerable areas, leading to an This rise in income inequality and its social ramifications bolster the theory of relative deprivation, an idea we've discussed in detail in neoliberalism, globalization, income inequality, poverty and resistance. Actually, the issue of relative deprivation we did not discuss in my first book. The second book, Neoliberal Globalization, we considered. I'll talk about relative deprivation. What we talked about was the Gini coefficient and income disparities compared to the countries of the global north and countries of the global south, and how certain policies help to facilitate that. Now, the new book talks about the rise in income inequality and its social ramifications, bolstering the theory of relative deprivation, an idea we've discussed, or we will discuss, or you will get to read about in detail when the book comes out, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, Neo-Capitalism and the Death of Nations. And in the book we'll explore how the theory fits into the broader conversation about economic policy and its societal consequences. Now, and the article is entitled, Does Sin and the U.S. Cities with High Crime and Murder Rates Suffer from Relative Deprivation? And this is an important point, because the question is, does St. Louis and other major cities, U.S. cities, suffer from relative deprivation? Data suggests that St. Louis is among the cities with the highest murders. So is Philadelphia. So is Chicago. Highest murders, the cities with the highest murder and crime rates. The data also suggests that St. Louis is among the cities with the highest inequalities or inequities and disparities. And there is a diagram which I reference. St. Louis is the second biggest city in Missouri with a population of 301,578,000 people, with 20% living below the poverty level. The average household income in the city is $45,782. St. Louis has become synonymous with high crime rates, not just with poverty, especially murders. Moreover, St. Louis has been continuously ranked among the most dangerous cities in U.S. in 2022. The city reported 199 murders and was named by Statista and the World Population Review data obtained from the FBI crime report as the most dangerous city in the U.S. by murder rates per 100,000 people. The city's violent crime rate is 420% higher than that of the national average. The 10 cities with the highest violent crime rates, number of incidents per 100,000 people, are St. Louis 1, Detroit 2, Baltimore 3, Memphis 4, Little Rock 5, Milwaukee, Rockford, Illinois, Cleveland, Ohio, Stockton, California, Albuquerque, and of course, Philadelphia is right up there in the mix. Crime and violence continues to spiral out of control, and the perpetrators are young men 10 to 25 who constitute the age group with the highest rates of arrest for all offenses, and especially violent crimes, murders, and robberies. Now, I won't get into the article because I'm referencing the article. But what is important is that the issue of crime and violence, has to be looked at within the socio-political. In retrospect, social movement theory with Marxist materialist school of thought advanced the concept of relative deprivation, a very important rationale to dealing with and understanding crime and violence of this nature. Social movement theory asserts that when one begins to see other people, they begin to compare themselves, drawing conclusions about themselves relative to that position. Example, we conclude previously that the experience and nature of poverty differs from place to place, so that a person may not feel or think and therefore may not act poor until they find themselves in another context or see other experiences that clashes with theirs. This theory then leads to a conclusion from scientific research and various studies within social Marxist materialism of relative deprivation, where society of higher income inequality are more prone to higher crime rates than communities that have lower income inequality. And I'm going to give you provide you with some data. Unemployment rates for the U.S. is at 5.3% in the United States. Well, actually, I won't get into that report because unemployment, it has improved. I think it's dropped to about 3.3. But the national average, the point is, the national average was better than the city average. While nationally unemployment is about 3 point something percent. In the cities, In certain cities, it's higher. St. Louis, Madison, St. Charles. Especially in cities where you have a high concentration of people of color. You find that unemployment is high. So the U.S. national data shows that crime has spiked, and that much of it occurs within certain cities and communities. The cities that have experienced rapid increases in violent crime with a weapon and robberies are among the poorest, with high levels of people of color, including St. Louis, Missouri, where CVPA is located. St. Louis overtook Detroit as the most violent crime in the U.S. with the highest murder rates, while at the same time St. Louis is among the cities with the highest inequality and disparities, with a Gini coefficient of between 0.9 and 1.2, suggesting significant inequality between the richest and poorest households, or wealthiest households. In fact, the Federal Reserve Bank data reports that from 2014 to 2020, there's been a steady gain in wealth among white Americans, but people of color have little to no change since the 1990s. Further, between 2020 to 2022, not only has white Americans' net worth increased, but it has skyrocketed, spiking upward drastically, which explains the almost vertical blue slope in the figure that you are seeing. This spike occurred during COVID, yet median incomes are falling and poverty rising, and poverty is rising because, again, the report suggests that poverty has doubled amongst children. And this seems to be correlating with to the spike in violent crime. So as we think about the world today and the IMF report, JP Morgan and other economists indicating recession, what's going on with the political and military conflicts happening all over the world, we are definitely out for a bumpy ride. We have already seen that they've tried to manage the gas prices, but it remains inconsistent, fluctuating. So we hope that the message or the news that we're getting will change. We hope that the IMF report will something will occur that will undo this outlook, and that will create a brighter picture. But I believe that we need to do more in communities. We need to hear our government talking more about how they can provide more support to people in communities, right? As loans and money to develop businesses dry up, and after COVID, a lot of people started their own businesses, and they are struggling. I spoke with a gentleman yesterday, and he was talking about how he was struggling with his business, as operating capital is very difficult to access. So we are hoping for the best, and we hope that sense will prevail will prevail in Palestine. But the war in Palestine is a historical war that's been going on for years, not just since 1947 or 1948, but even before that. And there are those who believe that the original people who came back to the West Bank and there are those people who believe that the original people who came back to Palestine aren't the people who were the originals, and there is no way that the Jews today in Europe, living in Europe, could and should have been able to reclaim that part of the West Bank, because that part of the West Bank was lost several years ago. So many people believe that there is no plausible argument that would provide the international community to wanting to invade part of the West Bank or part of Palestine and corner it for themselves, for a group of people. There are those who have that argument. That's an argument for convenience. There are those who argue that point. Whatever the case is, there is instability in the world today over land, over property. and it seems as if there is no end in sight. We hope that sense will prevail. This is the Nilo. And by the way, if you haven't checked out the A True Story in Prose that we did, A True Story in Prose to Ponder, please check it out. It's quite interesting. Visit us at theneoliberal.com and ronaldocmckenzie.com. Support us. Subscribe to our podcast by going to anchor.fm/theneoliberal/support. If you go to anchor.fm/theneoliberal/support, you can find us there, or you can find us on any stream. We are on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google Podcasts, Amazon, The Audible, so on and so forth. And we're also on YouTube and SoundCloud. Our latest stream is SoundCloud. Visit us at SoundCloud, Ronaldo McKenzie, or the Neoliberal. Thank you for joining us, and donate to us as well by going to anchor.fm/theneoliberal/support. Coming up next on the Neoliberal podcast is the Castro v. Trump Part 5. Mr. John Anthony Castro, who is running for president, and we've had him on the show. He's a contributor to the Neoliberal Round. He's running for president. He's the president of AI Tax and Castro and Company. He will be coming back sometime next week Monday, to do a sit down with us, to talk to us about the latest, what's going on with his lawsuit, and what's going on with his campaign. This is the Neoliberal Corporation. We are always serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was the monopoly. This is the Neoliberal podcast that brought to you by the Neoliberal Corporation. We are always serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was the monopoly. What good?